Evening guys, I'm Dave Canterbury with Self-Reliance Outfitters in the Pathfinder School. What I thought we'd do today is just take a piece of 1095 bar stock and we're going to make a simple bushcraft knife. I'll show you the process. It's pretty simple. It does take a couple of specialized tools, and again, you know, sometimes the investment is, yes, I have to buy a grinder that costs $400 or $500, but how many of these knives that are worth $100 can I make off that grinder and sell to people before that grinder is paid for? So sometimes you get what you pay for. You may have to spend a little money to get the right equipment, but I didn't start with this equipment either. I started with bench grinders, and I started making knives on bench grinders and with files and things like that. And you can do that. But I'm going to show you a couple tricks today that I'm going to use a stand-up belt sander for, and I think you'll be interested to see them on how to get a good grind line on your blade, a good even grind line. And we're going to use a stand-up sander for that, but we're going to use a couple real common man tools in conjunction with that. And we'll probably use a bandsaw to cut this out. So I've made sure that this thing's good and flat, and that's important, that this stock is flat. And now we're just going to decide what we want our profile to look like and cut it out on a bandsaw. Okay, so I took this thing and just ran it on a sander to make sure it was good and clean so that we can see lines drawn on it with a marker. And we want this knife to have a 5-inch blade. So if we measure down 5 inches, our blade length is going to go to about here. Give ourselves about 1/8 of an inch of play there. And then on top of that, I want about a 5-inch handle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down to 10 inches. It gives us a handle about right there. That gives us plenty of room to play with. And then this is scrap. Now, let's come up here to the blade and just kind of look at our profile. I think I want something that looks kind of like this. That comes down to a gentle curve here and then straight across. Has a little bit of a drop point here, but not too drastic. Not a spear point, a drop point. A spear point would come down to the middle of the stock. The drop point is going to be about 2/3 of the way down. So that's going to be my blade profile, and then this will be the start of my handle. Grind line will be about right here. Something like this. This doesn't have to be perfect right now. We're just kind of spitballing things here. And then I think I want to bring my blade up from there and make my handle something like this. Something in that fashion would probably suit me pretty good. So that's going to be the initial parts of the stock that we need to remove, that we can cut off with some type of a cutoff wheel on an angle grinder or a bandsaw. Anything that we can remove this material with will work. So we'll get that cut out and get this material here, 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 and here removed. Then we'll look at it again. Okay, that's a pretty close start. That's a pretty close start to the profile I'm looking for. Now I can take this over to the belt sander and knock it down to my initial profile. Now we're gonna have a bucket of water right here because we got to keep this blade cool as we do this. Now, if we push up here against this platen or this hard metal plate, we're going to remove a lot of metal on straight lines or straight hard edges. We come down here to the slack side of this belt and push in, it's going to make things softer and remove less material. So to get our profile, we're going to come up here to the hard flatten like this and go down to our grind line. Or excuse me, down to our pen line. And if the blade starts to get too hot to hold on to, then we're going to drop it in the water. That's why we've got this bucket of water here. Come through here and go right down to my line on the bottom. That radius right there. Get that nice and squared up. Get that drop. Knock any burrs off of it real quick. Everything's nice and smooth. Okay. That looks pretty good for a starter. Feels pretty good in the hand. Alright, now we're ready for the next step. Okay, so we've got our knife profiled about the way we want it now. And the next step is to grind our initial bevel on the blade on both sides. And we're going to go with the Scandinavian bevel. And the easiest way I've found to do that, down and dirty if you don't have a lot of fixturing, is to just make a wooden jig. And this is the wooden jig that I've been using for a little while. I'm going to flatten out the side of it because it's getting kind of beat up. But all it is a piece of 4x4 that's been milled down, and it has a 12-degree angle cut on the table saw on one side of the jig. And that side of the jig lays down flat, so when your blade is up, you're pushing a 12-degree angle into the sanding belt. And as you drag it along, you're cutting an even 12-degree bevel on one side, which gives you a 24-degree Scandinavian grind when you hit both sides. So let's just straighten this up real quick, and then we will show you how to set this thing up and show you how to get your initial grind. Okay, so we have a flat platen on our grinder here, and we can push against a flat surface, and we want to make sure that that surface is plumb, and it's a little bit out of plumb. So we will get that squared up first real quick by loosening up the bolts here and figuring out which way we need to go. And once we get that bubbled in, we'll tighten that dude down so it doesn't go anywhere. Just like that. And we're plumb. So now that part's right. We can move to the next step. And that is to set ourselves up a jig or a table for this grinding jig. And what I do with that is I just take a wooden frame that's made out of 1x material, and I set it right up against here, check it for level, and it's dead nuts. And then I put it right up to the platen, just like that. It doesn't have to be square, flat up against it, just needs to be close. And now I'm just going to clamp this frame down this table so that it doesn't move. Just like this. And that gives me a cheapy grinding platform in front of my grinder that I can set my jig on top of. Okay, now remember, with this piece of block, we cut an angle on the bottom of 12 degrees. So it will sit like this, which automatically puts this face at a 12-degree angle to the belt as we slide across this box. Now we can just take our knife, mount it to that block. We want to make sure that our knife is nice and flat when we do this. Lay it on the block, and what we'll do is we'll take a clamp, and this is just a cheap clamp from Menards. But what I want to do is I want to clamp this blade up, and then I want to clamp it so that the ricasso of the blade is right on the edge of this clamp. So this clamp is basically my stop on my ricasso to make sure that I don't go past my ricasso with my grinder. And I can just tighten that up and manipulate things around a little bit. Now what I sometimes do to keep this knife in the exact spot is I'll take a small wood screw and put it right in here at the bottom and just screw it in, and that keeps this knife from dropping because your belt is moving in this direction. So it wants to pull that blade down as you go across. If you just put a stop screw in there, you can alleviate that from happening. So again, if I take a small wood screw here and put it right here at the base of this blade, just like that. Doesn't have to be driven all the way in. Just need to stop that blade from dropping down. Now I'm ready to grind this side. So make sure you've got that thing a little bit out of your way here, your clamp. When you do this, you're just going to gently push the knife into the jig and grind across. And that's going to give you your initial profile or initial grind line. And you should go slow with this in the beginning to see what you're getting. Now when you're doing this, if you see an area of your grind line, this looks really nice right here, and I've got a little bit of an area here that's low compared to the rest of the grinding angle. That just means I need to spend a little more time in that area, but you've got to be really careful not to overheat the blade when you're doing this well. Now you can, just another trick that you can do is you can paint the edge of this blade with a marker and then take a drill bit the same diameter as the blade and scratch a center line on here on a flat surface. And that will give you kind of a stop to grind line there. I eyeball that most of the time, but it's a good idea, especially when you're first starting out, to have all the guides in place you can have to kind of tell you where to stop or when you've done enough. Now my ricasso is starting to drop a little bit. The rest of my grind line's nice and even right there. Again, this is a take your time thing. This is not something that you have to hurry with. The good thing about this is you can pull this thing right off the belt and push it right back into the belt. I really like this fixture because of that. It's just really simple to maneuver. Now you really want to keep this blade nice and cool while you're doing this, so you've got to be careful of that as well. It's about 25 degrees out here today, so I'm not having too much problem keeping it cool because I'm stopping off to look and see what I'm doing. But on a warmer day, that could be a problem. Generally you'll have one side that grinds easier for you than the other. And I don't know if it's a left and right-handed thing or what, but the opposite side usually grinds easier for me. This side's usually my harder side to grind. The other thing I like about this jig is that this doesn't so much matter because it's always held at that 25-degree angle to the belt. So if I want to turn it in just a little bit against the platen like this, to really eat off some material where I'm a little bit low, I can do that. Or where I'm a little bit high, I can do that easy enough. And that's helping my line drop. Okay, you can see what that looks like. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to let it cool down now and give it a break for a minute. And we'll come back and get after it again. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So now we're going to turn the blade over and do the other side. Okay, as we go to the other side, all we've done is turn the knife around. We've got a mark on the blade for our ricasso line. For some reason this is usually my good side. The knife grinds much smoother for me on this side than the other side. See what I'm getting there. Now as you're grinding your other side, you want to pay attention to the center line on your blade. Make sure that you are not going past the center line, and make sure that your bevels are even. What I also like about it is that you can just slide one area of the blade into the belt. You've got a spot that's high. You're not going to change that angle because it's set on a fixture. It really allows you to get a nice, even grind line. Okay, what you're really trying to do here is you're not trying to take this thing down to any kind of an edge. You're trying to get this thing down to about half the thickness of a dime before you heat treat it. If you get it too thin, you get that thing down to a wire edge before heat treat, you're going to make this blade edge brittle. You're going to end up knocking chips out of it later on. So once we get that done, we'll pull it off this jig. We'll take a look and make sure that our grind is where we want it, our initial grind is where we want it. We'll look at this angle here. We'll look at our ricasso on both sides to make sure it's fairly even, and our grind line to make sure it's fairly even on both sides. Everything looks really good on that so far. Now we're going to drill our handle holes in here while this thing is still soft before heat treat.